wheat seeding is right around the corner. We've been getting lots of questions lately from farmers saying, you know, wheat's actually worth something now, so rather than just throw the seed in the ground, I should probably try to raise as good a crop as possible. That's a good idea. So we'll give you just a few tips today.
I'll say this. You look at it that way and say, well, wheat's this price now instead of $3 like it used to be. I need to pay more attention. And yeah, you do need to pay more attention, and everything costs more, fertilizer costs more, crop protection costs more, all these things. So you do need to use those resources wisely, but you also need to pay attention to what's going on if the crop wasn't worth that much. So I'm not concerned either way. Either way, you need more bushels to make more money. So let's talk about making more bushels in wheat, and there are some things you can do right now with seeding. One of those things would be putting on seed treatments, and aerial application is nice too, but putting some seed treatment on would be a great deal. For example, at South Dakota State University in our home state, over the last 4 years, they've shown about a 3 bushel average using different seed treatments. So dealing with a fungicide on the seed is really important.
That's what I was going to say. When you talk about seed treatments, there are many things you can do. So specifically what they've had good results with is fungicide, something like Raxil or Dividend. You just want to make sure you're protecting that seed, especially if you've been getting some moisture, and hopefully in your area you have gotten some moisture. When you're putting that seed in the ground, hopefully there's enough moisture for it to grow. But keep in mind, when you've got enough moisture for it to grow, there's also enough moisture to get things like bacteria and fungi going in the soil too, and that's not always a good thing. So you want to protect your seed as best you can. But speaking of bacteria and fungi, some of those are actually beneficial. So when we talk about a product like Quick Roots, for example, that we've been using on our wheat and corn and soybeans, we've been getting good yield response out of that. So on our farm, when we'll treat our winter wheat seed this fall, we'll be using both Raxil and Quick Roots.
Now these are compatible. A lot of times we get questions, well, if you're putting a fungicide on and you're putting a product that has a bacteria and a fungi in it, are they compatible? And in this case, yes, they are. In the Quick Roots products, the fungi is actually a dormant spore. So you've got a dormant spore that's going to wait till it gets some moisture around it to start germinating, and just applying the seed treatment onto the seed isn't enough moisture to get that to happen. So you've got the fungicide there, you've got the fungus and bacteria there. They can coexist for a time. You put them on the seed now and then plant them and you'll be okay.
And like we always say, I mean, if you don't believe the stuff that we're talking about or doing on our farm, you know, you've got to prove these things for yourself on your own farm. We just encourage you to do a few trials on your own farm. That's how we've ended up in the situation we are now. We've done all the trials, we've done years of testing on our farm, and now we're doing things on a little bit bigger scale. So if you haven't been treating your wheat, if you haven't been using something like Quick Roots or some other microbial product that can help benefit your yield, just take a look at those, at least on a few acres. Do some strips, do some testing on your own farm, and then you'll know yourself, you'll have your own data to work with.
Okay, here's another big thing. When we're talking about winter wheat seeding, we got to have the fertility program right when we're going into this thing. Now, you can put on your nitrogen later with stream bars, so the nitrogen isn't a real big deal. What is a big deal, though, is P and K. We've got to get those on earlier to do a better job. We've got to have them out there now if you're putting on dries, and that way you've got more time to get moisture to break those products down. So when we talk about P and K needs, boy, this is really a big deal. When you think about potassium that a wheat crop removes, an 80 bushel wheat crop pulls about 28 pounds of potassium out of the ground, and it leaves in the truck with the grain. But it's really important to think about the stover. It takes 100 pounds of potassium per acre to raise that stover. So if you want a crop that gets up and stands, you know, it takes a lot of K.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we find running short around the country too. If you look at soil tests and it says a certain parts per million, you know what, we don't like the parts per million test with potassium because that doesn't really tell you what's available. We look more at the base saturation test, and we want to see your base saturation percentage somewhere in the 4 to 8% range on potassium. Then you're probably in good shape. The other thing we want you to supplement that testing with is looking at tissue analysis. Do this in a few different fields over a period of years, and you'll have a decent idea whether you're getting that potassium that's in the soil out.
Now, a wheat crop does also use phosphorus, so don't think, okay, this is just a potash issue. I get potash out there, I'm fine. You're going to need some phosphorus too. The other thing that a lot of people aren't thinking about is the calcium and sulfur that it pulls out of the ground. These are secondary nutrients, so
yeah,
they're
but
still
I don't
needed
worry
in
too
pretty
much.
good
I don't
quantities.
worry too much about the calcium. I mean, for most of the upper Midwest, we're in great shape in terms of calcium and even available calcium. But the sulfur is a bigger issue because we don't have dirty air anymore. We've cleaned up a lot of the air pollution in our
here
country.
we go.
Yep.
Brian wants to move to Beijing.
So we aren't getting that free sulfur with the acid rains anymore. It's a crime. It's terrible that they've cleaned up the air. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, an 80 bushel wheat crop will take approximately 14 or 15 pounds of sulfur out just with the grain. That's not even figuring the stover. So if you haven't been fertilizing your wheat crop with a little bit of sulfur, you might want to consider that as well.
Well, another thing that we've gotten a really good response in wheat on in many fields is micronutrients. This is one of the things that, you start spending money on N, P, and K, then you spend a little more money on the sulfur here, and man, there isn't a whole lot left in the budget, but don't forget about those last little things, because wheat crops definitely respond to micronutrients.
Yep, I wish we had more time to talk about winter wheat. There's so much to get to when you start looking at weed control and getting more into the fertility. You've got to focus on all these things on your farm. There is potential to make a lot of money with wheat now. There are a lot of little management details you can look at to improve the wheat on your farm and make more money.
Well, one of those details is getting control of our weed of the week. We'll talk about controlling this tough weed coming up next.